General Hospital spoilers tease that in the chaotic world of General Hospital, where the lines between right and wrong have long been blurred, Willow is faced with a devastating decision, and one that opens the door to one of the darkest and most profound new tragedies she's ever endured. As doors close. As people who once stood by her turn away or fall silent, Willow makes a final choice, to turn to Jason. Jason has long been a symbol of sanity and loyalty, a man of few words, of decisive action. Who knows how to keep the line between right and wrong in a world of chaos? For Willow, he's her only hope. No one can soothe Carly like Jason. No one can draw a line between broken hearts and fierce legal battles like Jason. So Willow came to him, pleading for help, not just as Michael's friend, but as the only intermediary who could stop Carly from gaining full custody of Wiley and Amelia. But that very act, Willow's dragging Jason into the middle of an already simmering war between her and Carly, opened a dangerous, new twist to the entire plot. Jason was no longer a neutral observer. He was now involved, forced to make choices, and his every move, no matter how well-intentioned, could be misinterpreted, exploited, or even seen as a betrayal. Carly, already on edge after learning that Willow had signed over Drew's guardianship papers, was furious that Willow would even drag Jason into a legal battle with her. For Carly, this is no longer a custody battle, it's an honorable fight, a bloody battle where trust, family, and the past are all used as weapons. Carly takes action. It's no longer just threats. It's no longer just instinctual protection. She recruits lawyers, reestablishes old relationships, resurrects old lawsuits involving Willow, and begins building a case against her, a case strong enough to force Willow to lose control of her child. Meanwhile, Jason is torn. He doesn't want to fight Carly, a woman he once trusted and deeply bonded to. But he can't turn a blind eye to Willow being pushed to the edge. Jason knows that Wiley and Amelia are not tools for revenge. But he also knows that things are spiraling out of control, and now, he's caught in the whirlwind. To make matters worse, Drew, Willow's designated guardian, begins to act in ways that frighten her. The controlling gestures, the domineering words, the plans without consulting her, all of these are slowly revealing a side of Drew that Willow has never seen. And in those moments, she begins to understand the fatal mistake of giving him legal guardianship. At the same time, news of the legal moves between Willow, Carly, and Jason begins to spread. Brennan, the calculating observer, begins to reassess the entire game, and he believes that it is Carly, not Jason, who has the upper hand. The backing of the underground forces, combined with the influence of the media and the social position, are giving Carly the upper hand. But while the surrounding forces prepare for a devastating legal battle, Michael, who is still recovering, may soon return. And the biggest shock awaits him. Willow not only gives custody to Drew, but also dares to ask Jason to take Wiley and Amelia from his own mother. In this maelstrom, Willow, once seen as the victim, is now at the center of complex and dangerous power struggles. People are choosing sides. Relationships are breaking. And when the smoke clears, no one can guarantee that there will be an intact family. And so, disaster is no longer imminent. It is happening, step by step, with new adjustments going further and further, testing all limits. Port Charles is on the brink of collapse when Willow, in an unthinkable move, chooses to reveal a secret that threatens to destroy the entire family, career, and trust that has existed for years. Michael is not Wiley's biological father. The real biological parent is Jason. An announcement that not only changes the entire legal basis of the custody battle, but also drops a time bomb in the heart of relationships that were once thought unbreakable. Willow, pushed to her breaking point by Carly's pressure, Drew's cold indifference, and Michael's absence while he recovers, chooses not to wait for pity or intervention from anyone. Instead, she makes a crazy turn, a radical correction, by exposing a secret she swore she would take to the grave. No one could have guessed that in the most miserable months, when Willow was alone, struggling between love and fear, she herself would harbor such a horrifying truth. And now, when Carly's trust is eroded day by day, when Michael is no longer her support, Willow understands that turning the tables cannot come from begging for mercy. It can only come from absolute power, and the greatest power in a custody battle is blood. With that declaration, Willow not only brought Jason into the light, but also dragged him into the center of a tragedy that he never wanted to participate in. Jason, from a neutral person standing between the parties, is now pushed into a new role, not as a protector, no longer as a counselor, but as a father. And the craziest thing is that he himself does not know if it is real or part of Willow's strategy. All his life, Jason has always avoided emotional complications, complicated relationships, and difficult-to-solve bonds. He once chose to give up his parental rights to Danny so he wouldn't drag his son into the dangerous maelstrom of a life of crime. But now, with Willow revealing such a truth, or at least a declaration that could change the law, Jason has no choice. He's faced with the possibility of fathering a child he's only ever thought of as a nephew. He's faced with the possibility of winning a war he never wanted to start, and doesn't know if he has the courage to end. While Jason is numb to the weight of his identity and responsibility, Carly is shattered in a different way. For Carly, this isn't just a shock of blood. It's a total betrayal, from Willow, whom she tried to forgive, from Jason, whom she believed would always be on her side, and worst of all, from Michael himself, though he has absolutely no idea. The fact that he may not be Wiley's biological father makes everything Carly has stood for turn out to be a lie. For Carly, keeping custody of Wiley and Amelia was no longer a duty. It was a way of life. It was her way of keeping a piece of Michael, a piece of her family. And now, if Jason was really Wiley's biological father, everything she had built, the legal paperwork, the support network, the relationships with lawyers and judges, was in danger of collapsing in an instant. Because the law would not side with her grandmother. The law would side with her biological father, whether he wanted it or not. Drew, who had been trying to control the situation from behind the scenes, was now forced into a position where he could no longer act as a guardian. If Jason was really Wiley's biological father, the guardianship that Willow had signed over to Drew would be meaningless. Drew would face losing both children, losing his status, and possibly losing the last shred of trust from Willow, the person he thought would always be there for him. But what has Port Charles shaking is not just the issue of paternity, but the chain of consequences it will set off. Jason, if forced to prove he is the father, will have to take a DNA test. The results, if true, will be used as legal evidence to change Wiley's entire custody, and possibly even reopen old records, leaving everyone, including Michael, exposed to the law. Michael, still in recovery, will return to the center of an unprecedented storm. He will have to face not only the truth that Wiley may not be his son, but also his mother, who is mad with rage, Willow, who has betrayed him in love and in truth, and Jason, who he once believed was his real brother. Michael's entire world, everything he knows about himself, about love, about family, will be shattered in an instant. And for him, the biggest question is not, who is Wiley's father, but, what's left? This crazy twist doesn't just change the custody battle. It changes the structure of the Corinthos family. It upends the order of power in Port Charles. It leaves Jason no longer the silent figure emerging from the shadows to protect, but part of the explosive epicenter, a man, a father, an icon now trapped in a role that can't be denied, can't be denied. And Willow, the one who started it all, the one who lit the fire, now stands in the ashes, waiting to see if she'll be the victor, or the first to burn. Port Charles was in a tense silence after Willow's shocking explosion. The news that Michael was not Wiley's biological father, that the man who actually bore the child's blood was Jason, had swept through every corner of the city like an unstoppable storm. But of all the people hurt by the truth, none had been as utterly shattered as Carly. A woman who had stood against all odds, who had faced enemies fearlessly, who had lost and been reborn, had now collapsed before the very people she had considered family, flesh and blood, the backbone of her life. Carly no longer recognized the world around her. Everything was blurred, distorted. and cold like a thick fog of betrayal. Willow had not just revealed a secret. She had torn the last fragile fabric that covered what remained of trust between the members of her once close-knit community. Michael, the son Carly had always put above all else, was suddenly an outsider in the life of the child he had raised as his own. But it wasn't just the truth about Wiley that broke Carly. What sent her spiraling into the deepest darkness was the name Willow had dragged into the center of this nightmare: Jason. Jason, her best friend, her comrade in arms. Her rock through Carly's darkest years, was now at the center of a secret that was destroying her entire family. There was no explanation. No sympathetic look. No clear reaction. Jason just stood there, cold and silent, and in Carly's eyes, that silence was the deepest stab. Willow might be hated. Drew might be her enemy. But Jason was a wound that could never be healed. He didn't have to say anything, because Carly felt it all in every gap, every deadly silence he left behind. And it was then, in the depths of her grief, that she had been betrayed by the last person she had ever trusted. The haunting moment Carly realized that Jason had known, or suspected, and told her nothing. Not a word of warning. Not a sign. Not a single act of protection. The man who had stood by her through the gunfire, hiding the terrible truths to protect her family, was now silent about something that would destroy Michael's life, Wiley's life, and her own. Carly felt like she was drowning in an ocean of pain, where the waves of truth kept washing away her last remaining defenses. Willow, Drew, and Jason were no longer family names. They were targets. The building blocks of a revenge strategy were beginning to form in Carly's mind. She didn't need to scream, she didn't need to make a scene. Her silence was now more dangerous than anything else. When Carly was silent, it wasn't a sign of acceptance. It was a storm brewing. A disaster brewing. A counterattack brewing with all the hurt pride and broken trust. Jason might not have wanted to be the center of attention, but he had no way back. He had been put in a place Carly could not forgive. Jason was no longer the one standing behind her. He was the one standing in front, blocking her way. He was the barrier, the living proof of a betrayal she could not forget. And Carly, the woman who had faced the most vicious forces, who had lost Sonny and kept going, was now truly broken inside. No more outbursts of anger. No more chaotic madness. There was only cold, sharp, unwavering pain, the most deadly emotion in all war. As Carly stood in the empty room, her eyes dulled as she stared out the window at the emptiness, she didn't think about Wiley. She didn't think about Willow. She didn't think about Drew. She thought about Jason. She didn't think about the day he'd put his hand on her shoulder and said he'd always be there. She didn't think about all the promises that had made her feel like no storm could ever bring her down. And now that the storm had brought her down, that hand was no longer there to help. It had withdrawn. It was gone. And Carly knew she had only herself left. Port Charles would no longer be safe. Not for Willow. Not for Drew. And certainly not for Jason. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't fight for mercy. She would act. With all the deepest hurt of a mother, a wife, a best friend stabbed in the back, Carly will not let it end like that. And that is the beginning of a real disaster. Jason is entering a new phase of his life, one where he can no longer stand on the sidelines of civil wars. No longer be a silent observer keeping the balance between forces, but now he is the center, the one who must make life or death decisions between two increasingly fractured worlds. While Port Charles continues to be engulfed by the shock of the truth about Wiley, from Carly's violent reaction, from Drew's shady plans and Willow's mental instability, Jason has another responsibility on his shoulders, ensuring the safety of both Willow and Sasha, two women at the epicenter of an unprecedented crisis. Willow is being pushed into a situation where there is no way out. She has recklessly revealed the secret about Wiley, that Michael is not her biological father, and that action has triggered a series of new adjustments in the entire underground power structure. F the Corinthos family. These adjustments are not just legal or emotional, but also permeate every decision, every alliance, every bloodline, and are taking things further than anyone can control. Willow is a target. Not just from Carly, who now sees her as the one who destroyed her world, but also from other forces who want to exploit the shock to push her into a corner. Take custody of Wiley and manipulate the child's future as a pawn in a game of power. Sasha is no better. After a long struggle with psychological trauma, she thought she could live in peace. But the mistakes of the past, the wrong choices, the connections that were taken advantage of, are starting to come back to haunt her in the most cruel ways. Sasha knows too much. About what's been going on behind the scenes, about the backroom deals, about the financial deals and hidden truths, and that makes her the one who holds the dangerous pieces. Enough for someone to want to silence her forever. And Jason, who doesn't seek trouble but is drawn into it, is now the only one who can protect them. But what he doesn't expect is that standing up for Willow and Sasha is no longer a moral choice. It's a strategic calculation. It's the beginning of a new control that he must embrace. Or else be turned into the next piece of the puzzle by the dark forces who will make him their next pawn. As Jason sets out to set up a system of protection for Willow and Sasha, he realizes he's up against more than one enemy. Carly no longer trusts him. Drew is secretly setting traps. Those who were once Sunny's allies are reluctant to let Jason take center stage. And in the midst of it all, Jason feels the pressure, not from fear, but from the fact that everything is unraveling from the principles he has followed all his life: loyalty, order, boundaries. Every move he makes to protect Willow is a silent declaration of war against Carly. Every step he takes with Sasha opens the door to the possibility of revealing secrets about old connections. Mistakes in the web of power. Jason is now under attack not only from the outside, but from the inside, from the suspicions of those who once trusted him implicitly. He no longer has the option of standing aside. Everything now pushes him to the brink of a decisive change: either he controls the game, or he is swept away with the storm. But what Jason doesn't expect is that protecting these two women is exposing a network of covert actions, hidden conspiracies, and making him the target of a series of covert attacks. The stalking, the surveillance, the distorted media image, all of it is happening silently, like undercurrents crashing against the cliff he's trying to build. Jason isn't afraid of confrontation. But he's never fought under siege like this, when the enemy comes not just from the shadows, but from people he once considered family. And what's more dangerous than the attack from the outside is the question from within: is he protecting the right people? Is he repeating the cycle that Sunny himself was trapped in, trying to save everything, and then losing himself? Port Charles is entering a new era, where trust is no longer a foundation. Where truth is a double-edged sword, and where Jason, the quietest, most loyal, and coldest man, is forced to become either the creator or the sacrifice. And in that moment, the latest dangerous attack aimed at him was not from bullets or blood, but from the eyes that once looked at him as a savior, now watching him as someone who could betray him at any moment. Port Charles has never seen the relationship between Carly and Jason so fractured. A bond that seemed eternal and unshakable is now crumbling, becoming one of the greatest psychological and emotional disasters in the history of two people who have been through so much pain, loss, and bloodshed. But now, in the midst of the crisis, the secrets exposed, the calculations and uncertain choices, Jason is no longer Carly's support, but the name in her sights. The truth about Wiley, the betrayal that Carly felt from Willow and Jason, and the deadly silence that Jason kept all this time, have pushed her to the edge of no return. To Carly, Jason is no longer a friend, an ally, or even a part of her flesh and blood. He is the one who knows but does not speak, the one who sees but does not act, the one who watches everything fall apart but does not reach out to pull her back from the abyss. And that's how their relationship began to rot from the core, without drama, but with long, suffocating silences, with cold stares, and with quiet but absolute loss. Carly didn't need to scream to show her hurt. Jason didn't need to explain to defend himself. It was clear, the two people who had once been a united front were now on opposite sides of the battlefield. This rift was not only personal, but also one of Jason's greatest strategic shocks, when his closest friend had become his most dangerous source of attack. Carly knew too much. She knew how Jason thought, how he reacted, his strengths and weaknesses, and even who he could trust. And that was the deadly weapon Carly possessed. No need for revenge, no need for compromise. By withdrawing trust, Carly had stripped Jason of his strongest line of defense. Behind the scenes, Carly began to take quiet, sinister steps. She didn't have to declare war. With a few phone calls, a few leaks, and a few names suggested in secret meetings, she planted seeds of suspicion around Jason, transforming him from a trusted figure to a person under surveillance. Allies who had once been loyal to Jason began to distance themselves. Some in Sonny's old network no longer called Jason the next guy, but referred to him only in the past. Jason, accustomed to solitude, faced a new form of isolation, pushed into doubt by the one person he'd thought would never turn his back. He began to receive anonymous text messages, warnings from old contacts, that someone was collecting information about his every move, every meeting, every single action. And as Jason stepped back to observe, to analyze, the first name that came to mind was Carly. No words were needed. Jason knew he had been targeted. Not by an outside force, but by an inside force. By the person he had sworn to protect at all costs. This shock, the breakup between Carly and Jason, was not just between the two of them. It was a sign of a complete change in the Port Charles underworld. When loyalty was rejected, when family was seen as a burden, when people who had walked hand in hand through blood and fire now chose to stand opposite each other, there was no such thing as safety for anyone. Jason was no longer fighting to protect Carly. Now, he was forced to protect himself from her.